My fiancée lied about being pregnant after I paid for her surgery, so I vanished without a trace, and what happened next destroyed her life. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and this all started the night my fiancée sat across from me at our tiny kitchen table, hands shaking, eyes already red, and said, "I need surgery, and insurance won't cover it." The overhead light buzzed faintly, casting that sick yellow glow, and I remember my chest tightening before she even finished explaining, because I already knew what was coming next. We'd been together 4 years by then, and I was always the stable one in the planner, the saver, the guy who didn't panic when life went sideways. She used to tell me, "You're my safe place," especially when she was scared, and hearing that made me feel responsible in a way I didn't know how to refuse. So when she talked about medical bills, recovery time, and how this surgery could affect her fertility, my own fears didn't matter anymore. She cried openly, voice cracking as she whispered, "What if I can't have kids after this?" She squeezed my hand and added softly, "I just thought we'd have a family someday, with you." That sentence lodged itself in my ribs and stayed there. Within weeks, my savings account was empty. I took out a loan I wasn't ready for, delayed plans I'd been quietly building for years, and told myself money was replaceable, but she wasn't. Every transfer felt heavy, but every time I hesitated, she'd look at me like I was her last lifeline. Her family suddenly loved me in public. Her mom would smile and say, "We're so grateful you're stepping up," while her dad joked about how lucky she was to have me. But behind closed doors, it was always, "You can cover this too, right?" Or, "This is temporary, don't overthink it." I kept telling myself this was what commitment looked like. That love meant sacrifice, silence, and swallowing doubt. I had no idea that this surgery, this single decision, wasn't help at all. It was the first chain they wrapped around my future, and I didn't even feel it tighten yet. A few weeks after the surgery, she woke me up before sunrise, sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone clutched in both hands. Her voice was shaking when she said, "I didn't plan to tell you like this, but I'm pregnant." The room felt unreal, like the air had thinned, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. She kept saying it was a miracle. That the doctors had warned her this might never happen. That somehow, against the odds, life had found a way. She cried again, repeating, "I'm scared but happy, aren't you?" And I nodded even though my brain was scrambling to catch up. Almost immediately, everything accelerated. She talked about moving up the wedding date, about needing a bigger place, about stability for the baby. I suggested we confirm things with a doctor, and her face changed for just a second, tight, guarded, before she smiled and said, "Of course, soon." Soon never came. Weeks passed with no appointments, no ultrasounds, no paperwork. When I asked questions, she'd get defensive. "Why are you interrogating me? Do you not trust me?" Every concern I raised somehow turned into me hurting her feelings. Her family stepped in fast. Suddenly I was getting lectures about responsibility, about manning up, about how real men don't doubt the mother of their child. Her mom pulled me aside once and said, "Stress can cause miscarriages. You don't want that on your conscience." So I stopped asking. I worked more hours. I sold things I loved. I told myself timing didn't matter, logic didn't matter, only doing the right thing did. But late at night, when she was asleep, I'd replay details in my head. Dates that didn't line up. Stories that shifted slightly each time. The way she avoided specifics, always steering the conversation back to fear or guilt. I told myself I was paranoid. That love required faith. Still, something about the pregnancy felt rehearsed, like a script she knew too well. And for the first time since we met, I started wondering whether I was building a future or being quietly boxed into one. Once the pregnancy became real to everyone else, her family stopped asking and started deciding. It began subtly, suggestions framed as concern, but it didn't take long before my life felt like a committee vote I was always losing. Her dad would lean back in his chair and say things like, "You'll need a place closer to us now," as if it were already settled. They talked about finances openly, right in front of me, like I wasn't a person but a resource. "Renting is irresponsible with a child coming," her mom said once, sliding a brochure for a more expensive apartment across the table. When I hesitated, she smiled thinly and added, "You want your baby growing up right, don't you?" Every boundary I tried to set was turned into a character flaw. If I questioned a cost, I was panicking. If I asked for time, I was not prioritizing my family. And if I pushed back at all, my fiancée would dissolve into tears, clutching her stomach and whispering, "Please don't do this right now." I noticed her tone change too. She stopped asking and started expecting. Bills appeared without conversation. Decisions were made without me, then presented as fait accompli. When I brought it up, she snapped, "I'm carrying your child, can you not make this harder?" The phrase "your child" became a weapon. It shut down arguments instantly. It made me swallow anger, doubt, exhaustion. I started hearing it even when she wasn't saying it, like an echo every time I thought about walking away. Her family began dropping comments that felt like warnings. "Men disappear when things get hard," her sister said once, staring directly at me. Her dad joked about child support laws, laughing a little too hard. I started feeling cornered, like every path forward required me to give more money, time, autonomy, while every exit was framed as abandonment. Late at night, I'd sit alone in the living room, scrolling through bank statements, feeling something heavy settle in my chest. That's when I started saving screenshots, writing dates down, and quietly paying attention. Not because I wanted to leave yet, but because something deep inside me whispered that I might need proof someday. The first real crack didn't come from a fight or a confession, it came from a phone call I almost didn't make. There was an issue with paperwork for her surgery, something about follow-up documentation I needed for the loan, and I figured calling the clinic directly would be faster than waiting on her. I remember standing in the parking lot at work, phone pressed to my ear, the sun too bright, my hands already sweating. The receptionist was polite, casual, clearly unaware she was about to tilt my entire world. She pulled up my fiancé's file and said, "Okay, I see the procedure. Just a reminder, patients are advised to avoid pregnancy for a while during recovery." I laughed nervously and said, "Oh, that won't be an issue," but my stomach dropped so hard it felt like I might throw up. I asked her to repeat it. She did. Slowly. Clinically. Like it was nothing. That night, I brought it up as gently as I could. I didn't accuse her. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Hey, the clinic mentioned something about timelines that confused me." Her reaction wasn't confusion, it was rage. She snapped that I was violating her privacy. That I was stressing her out. That I was acting like I didn't trust her. "Do you want me to lose this baby?" she shouted, tears spilling instantly, like a switch had been flipped. Her family piled on fast. Her mom called me cruel. Her dad said I needed to get my head straight. Everyone agreed on one thing: I was the problem. 4 days afterward, I questioned my own sanity. Maybe I misheard. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe fear was making me cruel. She'd softened just enough to keep me apologizing, telling me, "You're all I have right now." But something inside me had shifted. The fear I felt wasn't about losing her anymore. It was about how easily the truth bent around her emotions, and how fast everyone else helped twist it. I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining. And quietly, without telling anyone, I started looking for answers she never intended me to find. The proof didn't come from snooping or spying. It came from a mistake, hers. One afternoon, while I was at work, an email notification popped up on the shared laptop we still hadn't bothered separating. The subject line made my stomach tighten instantly. It was from a clinic I didn't recognize, and it started with, "Following up on your recent test results." I told myself not to open it. I sat there for a full minute, staring at the screen, feeling my pulse in my throat. Then I remembered every tear, every accusation, every time I'd been told I was cruel for asking questions, and I clicked. The email was short. Clinical. Cold. It clearly stated that her pregnancy test had come back negative. Not inconclusive. Not early. Negative. And the date was weeks after she'd woken me up crying about being pregnant. My hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down. I scrolled further, hoping, almost praying, I was misunderstanding something. But then I saw the attachment, documentation showing the surgery she claimed threatened her fertility wasn't even medically necessary. It was cosmetic. Elective. Nothing to do with reproduction at all. I felt sick. Not angry yet, just hollow. Like something essential inside me had been scooped out cleanly. Suddenly, every moment replayed itself in a new light. The rehearsed miracle. The avoided doctor visits. The way the baby appeared whenever money or control was slipping. It wasn't panic or confusion driving her behavior. It was planning. I didn't confront her. I didn't slam doors or demand answers. I closed the laptop, wiped my face, and went back to work like nothing had happened. That might have been the scariest part, how calm I became once I knew. That night, she curled into me and whispered, "I'm so grateful you're here." I stared at the ceiling, feeling her hand rest possessively on my chest, and realized something terrifying. She didn't just lie about being pregnant. She built an entire future on the assumption that I'd never check the foundation. And from that moment on, I stopped thinking about saving her. And started thinking about how to get out without destroying myself first. Knowing the truth didn't free me the way I thought it would. It trapped me inside my own head. Every smile she gave me felt staged, every touch felt calculated, and I had to pretend I didn't see the strings anymore. I laughed when I was supposed to, nodded when she talked about our future, and slowly felt myself disappear behind the performance. I stopped sleeping. At night, I'd lie awake listening to her breathe, replaying every conversation from the past year like evidence in a trial no one else knew was happening. During the day, I functioned on autopilot, working longer hours, answering texts with emojis, saying we're good whenever someone asked how things were going. Meanwhile, she leaned into the role. She posted vague pregnancy-related quotes online. She talked loudly to friends on the phone about cravings and fatigue, making sure I could hear. Once, I overheard her laughing and saying, "He's so stressed, but that's what happens when you're about to be a dad." I felt humiliated and invisible. I wanted to scream the truth, to throw the email in her face and watch the story collapse. But every time I imagined it, I saw her crying, her family circling, and me painted as the villain who abandoned a pregnant woman. No one would ask for proof. They'd already chosen their version of me. My bank account kept draining. Bills arrived I didn't remember agreeing to. When I hesitated, she'd snap, "Do you want me stressing the baby?" then soften instantly, touching my arm like nothing happened. That emotional whiplash wore me down faster than the money ever could. The lowest moment came one night in the shower. Water pounding against my head, chest tight, hands braced against the tile, realizing I was funding a lie and too afraid to stop. I remember whispering out loud, "I can't do this anymore," and then feeling ashamed for even saying it. I wasn't angry yet. I was exhausted. Empty. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to feel completely alone while standing right next to someone. That's when a quiet shift happened. I stopped thinking about fixing the situation. And started thinking about disappearing from it entirely. Once the idea of leaving settled in my chest, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt practical. Like survival. I didn't announce anything. I didn't threaten. I just went quiet in a different way. While she talked about baby names and nursery colors, I started separating my life piece by piece, carefully enough that no one noticed. I opened a new bank account during my lunch break, hands steady in a way they hadn't been for months. I redirected my paycheck. Cancelled shared subscriptions. Paused wedding payments without triggering alerts. Every small move felt like breathing through a crack in a sealed room. At night, I gathered evidence. Screenshots of messages. Copies of emails. Dates written in a notes app with more detail than I ever thought I'd need. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew if things turned ugly, truth alone wouldn't be enough without proof. The hardest part was pretending nothing had changed. She'd rest her head on my shoulder and say, "I don't know how I'd survive without you," and I'd swallow the urge to pull away. Her family kept tightening the net, suggesting joint accounts, hinting about legal paperwork for the baby. Each suggestion confirmed I was running out of time. I told myself not to rush. That panic would get me caught. So I moved slowly, deliberately, like someone packing an emergency bag while the house is still quiet. The guilt hit hardest in unexpected moments. When she laughed at a dumb joke. When she held my hand in public. When I caught myself almost believing the version of her I fell in love with. I hated myself for doubting, then hated myself more for remembering the truth. The final piece fell into place when my job offered a temporary relocation project. Different city. Short notice. No questions asked. I accepted without hesitation. That night, she talked about the future again. About how everything was finally coming together. I listened, nodding, already knowing the exact day I would leave. And for the first time in months, I felt something dangerous and steady at the same time. Relief. I left on a Tuesday morning while she was at her parents' house. No fight. No goodbye note. Just the quiet hum of the apartment as I zipped my bag, took one last look around, and shut the door behind me without locking it. My hands didn't shake this time. By noon, my phone started buzzing. At first it was confusion, where are you? Then panic, please call me. By evening, it turned sharp and desperate. This isn't funny. You can't do this to me. I didn't respond. I blocked her number, her family's numbers, and every mutual contact who might try to play messenger. The silence felt unreal, like stepping outside after a fire alarm finally stops ringing. The next day, emails started coming in. Long ones. Accusatory ones. Her mom threatened lawyers. Her dad demanded explanations. Someone mentioned abandonment. Someone else mentioned consequences. I archived everything without replying. Then the cracks started showing. Without my money, appointments got missed. Bills bounced. Excuses stopped working. People began asking questions she couldn't cry her way out of. Her social media went quiet, then erratic, vague posts about betrayal, stress, and fake support. I heard later, through someone I hadn't blocked, that her family demanded medical proof for work accommodations. That's when the pregnancy story stalled. No ultrasounds. No doctor's notes. No answers. I stayed invisible. New city. New routine. No digital footprint she could grab onto. Every instinct screamed to explain myself, to defend my name, but I didn't. I let the truth surface on its own, uneven and slow. Weeks passed. The silence stretched. And somewhere in that quiet, I realized something terrifying and powerful at the same time. Without me holding it up, her entire story was collapsing under its own weight. I didn't know yet how bad it would get. I only knew that for the first time since this began, I wasn't the one drowning anymore. I tried not to look back, but the fallout reached me anyway, slipping through cracks I didn't know were still open. A coworker's friend. A mutual acquaintance. Someone who felt the need to update me like I was still part of the mess. I never asked questions. I just listened. Once my payments stopped, everything unraveled faster than I expected. The loans I'd been covering went unpaid. The upgraded apartment she'd insisted on became impossible to afford. Creditors started calling people she couldn't avoid. Excuses that worked on me didn't work on banks. The pregnancy lie couldn't survive without structure. Her job asked for documentation when she requested extended accommodations. Her parents pushed for doctor visits they could attend. At some point, the word miscarriage came up, but even that required proof she didn't have. Friends noticed the inconsistencies. Dates shifted. Stories changed. The timeline didn't make sense anymore without me smoothing it over. One by one, people stopped defending her. Some quietly stepped back. Others asked questions out loud. Her family, the same people who'd lectured me about responsibility, started turning on her behind closed doors. Money they assumed I'd provide never came. Wedding deposits were gone. Legal threats they'd thrown around suddenly boomeranged back when contracts were reviewed. I heard she tried blaming me publicly, calling me unstable, cruel, abusive. But without proof, it didn't stick. People wanted receipts. She had none. The final blow came when someone contacted the clinic directly. The same way I had. That's when the truth stopped being deniable and started being documented. By the time I heard all this, I was sitting alone in my new apartment, the city noise humming outside the window. I didn't feel victorious. I felt numb. Because knowing her life was collapsing didn't bring satisfaction. It just confirmed something colder, that she'd built everything on my silence and expected it to last forever. And for the first time, I realized she might eventually come looking for me again. Not to apologize, but because she had nowhere else left to stand. She found me on a rainy Thursday afternoon, months after I vanished, standing outside the building where I worked like she'd been there a long time. Her hair was pulled back messily, eyes hollow in a way I almost didn't recognize, and for a split second my body reacted before my mind caught up. Then she said my name, and everything snapped into focus. "I just need 5 minutes," she begged, stepping closer. "I know you hate me, but please." People were walking past us, umbrellas brushing shoulders, and I felt exposed in a way I hadn't felt since I left. I told her calmly, "You shouldn't be here." No anger. No shaking. Just facts. That seemed to break something in her. She started talking fast about misunderstandings, pressure, fear. About how she never meant for it to go this far. About how she was lonely and scared and didn't know how to stop once the lie started. When I asked her directly about the pregnancy, she went quiet. Then she said it. There was never a baby. Flat. Almost relieved. Like she was tired of carrying it alone. I pulled out my phone and showed her the emails, the screenshots, the timeline. Not as a threat. As confirmation. Her shoulders slumped as she realized I hadn't disappeared blindly, I'd left prepared. She reached for me and said, "We can fix this." "We always fix things." I stepped back. "I already did," I said. She started crying then, real crying this time. Apologies poured out, layered on top of each other, each one too late. I listened until she ran out of words. Then I walked away mid-sentence. Didn't argue. Didn't explain. Didn't look back. As I reached the corner, I felt my phone vibrate with a message from her number, one I'd forgotten to block. And even without reading it, I knew this wasn't the end of the damage she'd set in motion. After that day, I didn't hear from her directly again, but her name kept finding its way back to me. Not through drama. Through consequences. Once the truth was out in the open, it spread quietly but relentlessly. People compared notes. Timelines got dissected. Financial records surfaced where emotions used to be. The same family that once defended her without hesitation suddenly went silent, then private, then careful. I learned that her parents had started paying people back, not loudly, not publicly, but urgently. Wedding vendors. Friends who'd lent money. Even a few legal threats that disappeared the moment paperwork was reviewed. They weren't protecting her anymore. They were containing her. At work, the story she'd told unraveled fast. HR wanted documentation she couldn't produce. Medical accommodations vanished. Whispers replaced sympathy. She stopped being the fragile victim and became the risk no one wanted attached to their name. Friends distanced themselves in a way that was almost surgical. No confrontations. No dramatic fallout. Just unanswered messages and fewer invitations until there were none left. People don't like realizing they were emotionally manipulated, it makes them ruthless in return. I heard she tried rewriting the narrative again. Claimed she'd been pressured. That she was mentally unwell. That I was controlling. But without me there to absorb blame or stay silent, the story collapsed under its own weight. What surprised me most was how little I had to do. I didn't expose her. I didn't post anything. I didn't defend myself publicly. I just let records exist and time do what it always does. By the time months passed, her name carried a quiet warning attached to it. Not scandal, worse. Distrust. One night, sitting alone, I realized something unsettling. The damage to her life didn't come from my disappearance. It came from the moment she assumed I would never leave and built everything on that certainty. And in that realization, I felt the final piece of guilt I'd been carrying finally loosen its grip. Rebuilding didn't happen all at once. It started quietly, in small, almost boring ways, paying off debt month by month, cooking for myself again, sleeping through the night without waking up in a panic. For a long time, I didn't tell anyone the full story. I just said, it ended, and let people fill in the blanks. Therapy came next, and that was harder than leaving. Saying things out loud forced me to accept how deeply I'd confused love with endurance. How I'd believed being needed was the same as being valued. My therapist once said, "You didn't lose years, you learned boundaries the hard way," and that sentence stayed with me. Slowly, my nervous system calmed. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped replaying arguments that never needed to happen. I learned that real intimacy doesn't require fear, guilt, or silence to survive. I never reached out to her again. Not to gloat. Not to explain. Not to forgive. Closure didn't come from a final conversation, it came from watching my life expand once she no longer occupied every corner of it. The strangest part is this: I don't hate her. I don't wish her pain. What I feel now is distance. Clean, intentional distance. I understand something now that I didn't before. Manipulation only works when you stay accessible. Lies only survive when someone keeps paying the cost to maintain them. Walking away wasn't weakness, it was the first honest decision I'd made in years. Sometimes people ask why I disappeared instead of confronting her publicly. I tell them the truth. Because silence didn't protect her, it exposed her. And because the most devastating response to someone who feeds on control is to remove yourself completely. I didn't get revenge. I didn't need it. I got my life back.